This story is titled, Mom and Dad Stole My Years of Savings from My Safe for Their Luxury Trip, Kicked Me Off the Plane claiming I'd been hoarding money too long, so I got a lawyer who destroyed their plans, and now they're begging for forgiveness and financial help. Hey everyone, my name is Marcus and I'm 29 years old. I work in digital marketing, nothing particularly fancy or glamorous, but it provides me with stable hours and decent money. The best part about my job is that I don't have a boss constantly breathing down my neck, which allows me to maintain a healthy work-life balance. For years now, I've been diligently saving up money, slowly stacking away my quarterly bonuses in my savings account. My goal has always been simple: accumulate enough for a down payment on a house. I'm not trying to buy some extravagant mansion in Beverly Hills or anything like that. I just want a little place that's truly mine, with a front door that doesn't slam shut unless I actually want it to. I've been living in the same apartment for almost 8 years now, and I'm definitely ready to move on to the next chapter of my life. The last few years have been rough, though not exactly tragic. I've worked my ass off during this time, lived well under my budget, and skipped a lot of things that most people take for granted. No big vacations, no brand new car, and nothing I couldn't afford to pay for outright. Being single with no kids and no real family obligations, you'd think that would mean I could enjoy some peace and quiet, right? Yeah, no. That's where my parents, Linda and Robert, come into the picture, and they are absolutely exhausting to deal with. Here's the thing about my parents. They're not outright mean people, and that's actually what makes this whole situation so much more difficult. If they were just plain mean, it would be so much easier to walk away from them completely. But no. They're the smiling, passive kind of toxic that's much harder to identify and escape from. They're the type who say things like, "You've always been so responsible," in a tone that really means, "You're our safety net now, and we expect you to act like it." And then there's my younger brother Derek, who's 26 years old. Oh boy, where do I even begin with Derek? He calls himself an entrepreneur, which apparently translates to designing logos on Figma and posting 5 Instagram reels per week talking about hustle culture while living in our parents' basement. The last real job he had was 5 years ago, and even that only lasted 3 months before they fired him. The reason? He wouldn't stop showing up late on principle. I wish I was making that up, but that's literally what happened. Despite this track record, Derek has always been the golden child in our family. He got caught cheating on exams in high school, and my parents' response was, "He's under pressure." He spent 4 semesters in community college before dropping out, and they said, "College isn't for everyone." When he totaled his first car, their explanation was, he was just going through a hard time. This pattern of excuses is absolutely endless. Meanwhile, I get side-eyed for not showing up to family barbecues because I'm either working or too tired from actually maintaining a career and responsibilities. The double standard has always been glaringly obvious, but I've learned to just accept it as part of the family dynamic. Anyway, fast forward to last Wednesday, when everything changed. I was having a relatively slow afternoon at work and decided it was finally time to sit down and take a proper look at my finances. I had just received my quarterly bonus, which came to $1,900 give or take, and I was planning to move the entire amount into my dedicated down payment savings account. I opened up my savings account app on my phone, fully expecting to see the complete amount sitting there untouched, just like it always had been in the past. The money had always been safe there, accumulating slowly but steadily toward my future home purchase. But it wasn't there. The balance showing on my screen was under $900. I stared at the number for a moment, convinced there had to be some kind of mistake. I refreshed the page about 6 times, thinking it might be a technical glitch, or that maybe I had somehow logged into the wrong account by accident. But no, this was definitely the right account, with real charges showing, and the money was genuinely gone. All $1,900 had vanished. The money hadn't been spent gradually over several months either. Looking at the transaction history, it appeared as though someone had run through it during a single weekend, like they were on some kind of spending spree. I started scanning through the individual transactions more carefully, and that's when I felt my chest start to tighten up with anxiety and disbelief. The charges were for hotel bookings, flights, and spa packages. One particular charge was literally labeled Tropical Paradise Sunset Experience, which made my brain stop working for a few seconds. My first thought was that this had to be some kind of scam, like someone had hacked into my account and was using my money fraudulently. But then I started noticing the specific details in the airline information, and my heart sank. The bookings were made under my parents' names, Linda and Robert, as well as Derek's name. But it didn't stop there. Derek's girlfriend was included, plus several other people I recognized from family gatherings. My aunt and uncle were on the list, And even my cousin Nathan, who I hadn't spoken to in months, was part of this group. They had booked themselves a group vacation to the Bahamas. We're talking about a full week at a luxury resort, complete with excursions, flights, and every premium amenity you could imagine. And they had used my money, every single penny of my carefully saved funds, to pay for this extravagant trip. But here's the part that really made my jaw drop and sent me into a state of complete disbelief. I wasn't even invited to this vacation. There was no mention of me anywhere in the planning. No, "Hey, we're thinking about organizing something" conversation. No inclusion whatsoever. They had literally used my savings account as their personal vacation fund for a family trip that didn't include the person whose money was funding the entire thing. After the initial panic and shock wore off, I knew I had to call my mother and confront her about this immediately. I was already shaking as I dialed her number, trying my best to stay calm, but I had absolutely no idea how I was going to get through this conversation without completely losing my temper and yelling at her. She answered the phone all cheerful and upbeat, like absolutely nothing was wrong with the world. "Hi, honey, everything okay?" she asked, in that sweet, innocent tone that now made my stomach turn. I didn't waste any time with small talk or pleasantries. "Hey, did you take money out of my savings account?" I asked directly. There was complete silence on the other end of the line. The pause stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and I could practically hear her brain scrambling to figure out how to respond to this question. Then finally she said, "Oh, that? We were going to tell you about it." I honestly didn't even know what to say to that response. The casual dismissiveness of it was absolutely mind-blowing. So I just asked the obvious follow-up question. "You used all of it?" "We didn't use all of it," she replied, as if that somehow made the entire situation perfectly acceptable and reasonable. Then she launched into her justification. "It's a family trip, and we thought it would be a good use of the money since you weren't doing anything with it yet. We thought you'd be happy to help out. You're always so generous, Marcus." I went completely quiet after hearing that explanation. I didn't even have the energy to get angry in that moment because my body just kind of froze up in shock. The audacity of what she was saying, treating my life savings like it was some kind of family slush fund, was beyond anything I could have imagined. But she wasn't done talking. She kept going, trying to justify their actions and make it sound reasonable. "We just thought it made the most sense for you to cover it since everyone else is a bit strapped for money right now and you've always been so good with money," she continued. She was talking about me like I was a community donation jar, like it was just obvious and natural that I would pick up the tab for a group vacation that I didn't even know existed until I discovered the charges on my account. I couldn't take any more of this conversation. I hung up the phone without saying another word. Didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't try to explain why this was wrong. I just ended the call completely. Then I sat there with the phone still in my hand, staring blankly at the wall. I could feel my blood pressure climbing steadily, and my eyes started twitching from the stress and anger building up inside me. And then a realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They really thought they were going to get away with this. They actually believed that I wouldn't do anything about it, that I would just accept what had happened and move on. Like I was nothing more than a passive savings account with legs, existing solely for their financial convenience. Well, they wanted their trip, and that was fine with me. They just weren't going to enjoy it the way they had planned. There was no going back now. Not this time. I've let a lot of things slide over the years. I've covered Derek's car payments when he was between gigs, paid off my dad's surprise medical bill that he swore the insurance would reimburse. Spoiler alert, it didn't. And let them use my Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus, and Spotify accounts like they were family perks that came built into my existence. I never said much about any of these things. I just kept working, kept saving, and kept telling myself that it was all temporary. That maybe one day they would appreciate what I was doing for them, or at least stop asking for constant help, or at the very least stop expecting it as if it were my obligation. But this situation was completely different from all those other times. This wasn't a late bill or a small favor. This was my house money, my entire future that I had been working toward for years. They didn't ask for permission, didn't warn me it was happening, and didn't even bother to tell me about it. They just swiped $19,000 like it was loose change they found in the couch cushions, and then tried to dress it up as some kind of wholesome family fun. And the best part of this whole situation? They weren't even planning to tell me about it until after they were already lounging on the beach, sipping cocktails that I had unknowingly paid for. I wasn't about to let that happen. The first thing I did was dig up the old banking information to understand exactly how this had happened. The account they had drained was an old joint savings account that I had left open with my mother during a time when she was sick a few years back. I had thought it would be helpful if she needed to access funds quickly in case of an emergency. Apparently, she had saved the login information from that time, and I guess she had shared it with my dad and Derek somewhere along the way. It was incredibly stupid of me to leave that account open and accessible, but it was also going to be incredibly useful for what I was planning to do next. I called the bank immediately, not some automated menu system, but got an actual live person on the phone. I laid out the entire situation for them, walking them through how the account had originally been opened, what it was supposed to be used for, and explaining that I had never authorized any travel purchases, especially not for 7 other people who weren't even account holders. The customer service representative was super calm and professional, but I could tell from her tone that she understood the level of mess this situation really was. "Were any of these charges disputed prior to today?" she asked me. "No, because I literally just found out 10 minutes ago that my own family used my money like it was a group fundraiser," I replied. She let out this tiny chuckle, the kind you try to hide when it's not professional to laugh. But the situation is so completely absurd that you can't help yourself. She walked me through the fraud claim process step by step, noted all the unauthorized charges, flagged the suspicious transactions, and told me to hang tight while the system processed the account block. Those 15 minutes of waiting felt like the longest 15 minutes of my entire life. While she was handling the technical side of things, I opened up my flight booking app and booked a trip for myself. Nothing particularly expensive or extravagant, just a quiet little resort on the West Coast where I could lie on a beach with my phone set to "Do Not Disturb" and eat overpriced fish tacos in complete peace. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't doing this to treat myself or as some kind of reward. This was pure, unfiltered, strategic spite. I wanted them to know that while their vacation was falling apart, I was living my best life on a beach somewhere. Once the fraud case was officially filed, the account was immediately frozen. All the charges were reversed and marked as pending investigation, which is basically bank speak for "you're not going anywhere unless you can cough up the funds yourself." That meant their flights were canceled, hotel reservations were locked up and voided, and all those spa days they had planned just completely vaporized into thin air. I gave it about 26 hours to let the chaos really simmer and build up before I did anything else. I didn't post anything on social media yet because I knew they would try to call me once their carefully planned vacation started falling apart. And I wanted that panic and confusion to happen first. I wanted the full airport scene. That moment when they all showed up with their packed bags and printed boarding passes, only to get stonewalled by a confused airline employee holding a tablet and saying, "I'm sorry, but these tickets don't exist anymore." Exactly 24 hours and 37 minutes later, my phone started buzzing with incoming calls. The first call was from Derek, which I ignored completely. Then my dad called, and I ignored that one too. Then my mom called, and I let it ring out completely the first time. When she called again immediately after, I decided to answer. She didn't even bother saying hello or any kind of greeting. She just launched straight into panic mode. "What did you do? They canceled our flights. We're at the airport right now." I put her on speakerphone and leaned back in my chair, getting comfortable. "Did they? That's really wild," I said in the most casual tone I could manage. She kept yelling into the phone. "Marcus, you can't do this. We spent weeks planning this trip." "Right," I replied calmly. "The trip that you funded with my money." She actually had the audacity to say, "You weren't using it. It was just sitting there." I leaned in toward the speakerphone. "That's what saving is. That's literally the entire point of putting money aside." "You're being petty," she snapped at me. "And you're being a thief," I replied without missing a beat. She went off on this long, dramatic rant about how I had embarrassed the entire family and how everyone at the airport was looking at them like they were criminals. I wonder why that might be. She complained about how Derek's girlfriend was crying and how I had made my point, and could I please just call the bank and undo everything I had done? I told her absolutely not. And then, just to really twist the knife and drive the point home, I told her to check Instagram because while they were stuck at gate B17 waiting on some kind of miracle, I had posted a photo of myself stretched out comfortably on a beach chair with the caption "Vacation time, fully funded, fully invited." That's when she hung up on me. About 20 minutes later, I started getting angry text messages from every possible direction. Derek accused me of being abusive and manipulative. My aunt called me a narcissist who was destroying the family. My cousin Nathan said I had traumatized everyone and was acting like a spoiled child. Even someone I didn't even know, Derek's girlfriend's sister or something like that, somehow found my contact information and messaged me, calling me selfish and toxic. That last message actually made me laugh out loud. Imagine the absolute audacity of siphoning $19,500 from someone's savings account, planning an elaborate vacation that completely excludes the person whose money you're using, and then having the nerve to call them toxic when the whole scheme gets shut down. It's like robbing someone at gunpoint, tripping over your own feet during the getaway, and then blaming the sidewalk for being uneven. I didn't respond to any of these messages. I didn't need to justify my actions or engage with their emotional manipulation tactics. They could scream and complain all they wanted, but the facts remained the same. They weren't getting the money back. They weren't getting their vacation. And most importantly, they weren't getting me to back down this time. I turned off my phone completely, laid back in my comfortable beach chair, and just listened to the peaceful sound of the waves crashing against the shore. For the first time in years, I felt absolutely no guilt about my decision. No second-guessing, no mental gymnastics trying to justify their behavior as they meant well, or they were just stressed out. This was exactly what the situation looked like: theft, pure entitlement, and the arrogant assumption that I would never actually push back against their treatment of me. But I did push back, and this time I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. Unfortunately, they didn't take the hint. Or maybe they did understand the message and just didn't care either way. By the time I got back from my relaxing little beach trip, they had escalated their response from angry texts and guilt-tripping voicemails to something considerably more theatrical and dramatic. I pulled into my apartment complex on a Thursday afternoon, ready to throw my laundry in the washing machine and decompress from my travels, only to find three very familiar faces standing by my front door like it was an episode of some family intervention reality show. My parents and Derek were all waiting there with their arms crossed, looking like they were about to stage a protest right on my doormat. I parked slowly, took a moment to breathe and collect myself, then grabbed my travel bag and walked up the stairs, acting like I didn't see them standing there. I honestly hoped they would be embarrassed enough by the awkwardness of the situation to pretend they were in the wrong place and just leave. But of course, that would have required them to have some level of self-awareness, which was clearly too much to ask for. Mom was the first one to speak up. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stared at her for a second and replied, "You came all the way here uninvited to talk after robbing me?" She looked genuinely offended by my characterization of what had happened. "Don't say it like that," she protested. Dad jumped into the conversation, trying to sound reasonable and diplomatic. "We just want to clear the air and work this out." Derek predictably said nothing helpful. He just stood there with his usual expression, which always seemed to be somewhere between smug superiority and annoyed inconvenience, like this entire situation was beneath him and he had much better things to do. He was probably mentally designing his next brand logo in Figma while waiting for someone else to pay his phone bill. I unlocked my door and left it open behind me. "Say what you came to say," I told them. They followed me into my apartment like they owned the place. Mom sat down on my couch like she belonged there. Dad started pacing around my living room, and Derek leaned against my kitchen counter without asking permission. "We didn't think it would blow up like this," Mom started, trying to sound apologetic. "It got out of hand." "You think?" I said, setting my bag down and looking at her with disbelief. "We just figured you weren't going to use the money right away," she said again, like repeating that excuse would somehow make it hit differently if she said it enough times. Dad tried to approach this from a more logical angle. "Look, the flights are gone. The hotel's canceled. We're not asking for anything now, but this whole situation, it's not good for the family." I laughed out loud at that. "I'm not good for the family? Y'all took 19 grand and went behind my back to plan a vacation, and I hit the brakes on your scheme. Now I'm the bad guy?" Derek finally opened his mouth to contribute something to this conversation. "It's not about the money, it's about how you handled it," he said, with that condescending tone he always uses. I turned to face him directly. "You're absolutely right. I should have gone down to the airport and tackled you on the jet bridge instead." "Don't be sarcastic," he replied, rolling his eyes. "That's how I cope with absurdity, Derek," I shot back. He threw up his hands in frustration. "You make good money, so why does it even matter to you? You live in a one-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture." "That's because I don't spend $19,500 on a single trip," I explained. "That's called being responsible with money." He continued his rant. "You're acting like this completely ruined your life or something." "No," I said calmly. "I'm acting like someone who finally realized that I've been treated like a backup plan with a bank account attached." The silence that followed that statement hit differently than the previous arguments. You could feel the tension in the room shift as the reality of what I had said sank in. My mom spoke again, this time in a quieter, more subdued tone. "We just wanted the family to have one good trip together. So you decided to steal from me to make that happen," I replied. Dad stepped back into the conversation, trying to regain control. All right, this has gone too far. Let's be reasonable here. Just call the bank, tell them it was a misunderstanding, and fix the damage that's been done. I leaned against the table and looked him dead in the face. You think the damage is the frozen flights and the canceled hotel reservations? No. The damage is you deciding that I don't get a say in how my own money is used. He looked increasingly frustrated with my refusal to back down. So you're going to destroy your relationship with your entire family over one mistake? I didn't blink or look away. You destroyed it when you decided that my financial independence was negotiable. Then I walked over to my desk, opened up my laptop, and logged into every single shared account that they had ever used or benefited from. Netflix, gone. Spotify Family Plan, everyone kicked off. Amazon Prime, access revoked. They didn't even realize what I was doing in real time until Derek's phone buzzed, and he looked down at it with confusion. You locked me out of Spotify, he said, like I had just unplugged his oxygen tank or something equally dramatic. Sure did, I said without missing a beat or looking up from my laptop. Anything you're using that has my name on it is officially over. Dad's tone shifted instantly when he realized what was happening. Don't do anything drastic, Marcus. Oh, I'm past drastic. I'm at clarity, I replied. Then I opened my banking app on my phone and clicked the final piece of this puzzle. Closure of the old joint savings account. No more joint accounts of any kind. I was completely done playing the role of community piggy bank for this family. You don't get to shut us out like this, Mom said, suddenly standing up from the couch. You already shut me out when you made financial decisions about my future behind my back, I said, keeping my voice flat and emotionless. Derek shook his head and said something that actually made me laugh. You're punishing everyone for being loved. No, I replied. I'm punishing people for treating me like a budget line item instead of a family member. I stood up and pointed directly at the door. Now get off my property and don't ever show up here unannounced again. Dad looked like he wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words. Derek looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't come up with a comeback. Mom just started crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but more like a soft whimper that I might have felt bad about 7 years ago. Now it just felt manipulative and calculated. They left without any more drama. They didn't slam the door, didn't shout on their way out, they just walked out like all the energy had been completely drained from them. And as soon as they were gone, I locked the door behind them, shut off my phone completely, and sat down on the floor. No TV, no music, just complete silence. And it was the first time in years that silence felt peaceful instead of lonely, because for the first time, I wasn't paying for peace and still getting chaos in return. So I thought that locking the door on them, both literally and financially, would be the end of this whole situation. I figured they would rage and throw a fit for a few days. Maybe Derek would make some passive-aggressive Instagram story about fake people cutting off real ones, and Mom would probably email me some long-winded Bible verse about forgiveness. Then they would eventually move on with their lives and leave me alone. But apparently I had poked a bear that I didn't even know was sleeping. The guilt parade started exactly 3 days after I kicked them off my front porch. It began with a text message from my Aunt Beverly, someone who hadn't bothered to message me in months unless it was to say happy birthday in the most generic copy and paste way possible. Her message read, "We're all really disappointed in how you handled this situation. Your mother is absolutely heartbroken. Is that really what you wanted to accomplish?" I stared at that message for a full minute, processing the audacity of it. I didn't bother replying to her, but I did screenshot it and saved it in a folder that I mentally titled Emotional Blackmail Volume 1. Then came the group messages. Derek dropped a massive paragraph in the family group chat, which I had renamed Offline before muting permanently. It was some completely unhinged monologue about how I was alienating everyone who had ever cared about me, that I should have come to them like a man to discuss the situation, and that canceling people over money was disgusting behavior. This criticism was coming from the guy who once refused to come to my birthday dinner because the restaurant was too far away. It was 17 minutes from his house. He also managed to use the word toxic 5 times in his rant and included a quote from some online guru he follows. Something like, "True wealth is measured by connection, not control." I think I laughed so hard at that line that I actually pulled a muscle. After that, I received 3 voicemails in a row. One was from Mom, which started out calm and reasonable but turned into full-on sniffling drama halfway through. One was from Dad, where he kept calling me son, like that title still held some kind of weight or authority over me. And one was from Nathan, My cousin, who had never paid me back for the PlayStation 5 pre-order I had covered for him, who apparently thought this was his moment to step up as some kind of family mediator. I kept all these messages but didn't respond to any of them. I needed space and peace, not more gaslighting and emotional manipulation. Then I made a decision that felt both drastic and liberating. I logged into my phone carrier's website and changed my phone number. Yes, after 16 years with the same number, I finally got a completely new one. I sent the updated contact information to the handful of people who actually respected me and treated me well. Mostly coworkers and 3 close friends who had proven themselves to be genuine. Everyone else was cut off completely. No access, no way to reach me, no more unwanted contact. And it was like a massive weight dropped off my chest. I didn't realize how much psychological pressure I had internalized from constantly being on the defensive until I wasn't waking up to paragraphs of guilt and call alerts anymore. No more waking up already feeling defensive about whatever drama they had cooked up overnight. No more emotional landmines hiding behind voicemail notification badges. The quiet was absolutely addictive in the best possible way. But the storm still hadn't completely passed. Because when you stop being useful to people who only loved you for what you could give them, they don't just go silent and disappear. They get creative and find new ways to reach you. 3 days after changing my phone number, I received an email from Dad. It wasn't a long, elaborate message. Just a single line that read, "We need to talk before this gets worse." That was rich coming from the guy who had let Derek treat a joint savings account like it was a group piggy bank, and then showed up at my apartment like I owed him a sit-down conversation to explain my actions. Worse? I thought to myself. What could possibly be worse than not being their human ATM anymore? I left the email on unread, or I guess on read, since I didn't even bother opening it. Then came a message through Venmo of all platforms. It was 0.01 from Derek with the label, "Please just talk to Mom." This approach was both pathetic and weirdly genius in its own manipulative way, using a payment app to try to guilt me into contact. I didn't respond to that either. Instead, I blocked him on Venmo as well. Here's the part that people don't tell you about setting boundaries for the first time in your adult life. It doesn't feel good right away. It's actually pretty awful at first. You second-guess every decision you make. You wonder if you're overreacting to normal family dynamics. You wonder if the silence and distance means you've done something fundamentally wrong. But then I started remembering all the little things that I had pushed down and ignored over the years. The way they only ever invited me to family gatherings when they needed help setting up tables, or hauling folding chairs from the garage. It was never, "Come relax and enjoy yourself," or "We want you there because we love spending time with you." It was always, "Can you bring ice?" or "Be there early to help with decorations." I had become the unofficial setup crew for birthdays, baby showers, and anniversaries, but somehow I was never treated like an actual guest of honor at any of these events. Then there were all those little comments that they thought I wouldn't catch or remember. Like when Mom said, "I'm so proud that one of my sons doesn't need constant support," while Derek was sitting right next to her during a family dinner. He just smirked like it was some kind of inside joke, and I smiled too because that's what I used to do, pretend it didn't bother me and brush it off. But the message was crystal clear. Derek needing help constantly somehow got him more love and attention, while me not needing anything meant I received less care and consideration. It was a completely backward system that rewarded dysfunction and punished responsibility. It wasn't just about the money that they had stolen. This was about years and years of being treated like a support beam for a house that I didn't even live in. And I had finally stopped holding up the structure for them. That weekend, I got a knock on my door. My neighbor Carol, a sweet older woman who always waves at me when I bring in groceries, was standing there holding out a letter. "They left this for you," she said. "I saw them trying to slide it under your door, but I was out walking, buddy, and thought I should make sure you got it." I took the letter from her and immediately recognized the handwriting as Mom's distinctive cursive. I didn't even bother opening it. I walked straight to my desk and dropped it directly into the paper shredder without reading a single word. Because whatever apology or guilt trip was written in there, if it was even an apology at all, wasn't about making things right or acknowledging what they had done wrong. It was about making me into the villain for choosing to put myself first for once in my life. And I was completely done with that storyline. I didn't expect them to give up easily because I knew exactly how this family operated. My parents and Derek don't apologize when they mess up. Instead, they reframe the situation. They don't own what they did wrong. They pivot and spin it into, "You misunderstood our intentions," or "That's not what we meant." Or my personal favorite deflection, "You're blowing this completely out of proportion." Their strategy has always been to rely on me getting tired of the conflict first. That's how it's worked for my entire adult life. They would keep pushing and manipulating until I eventually gave in just to make the drama stop. But I didn't fold this time. I stopped replying to their attempts at contact, didn't answer the door when they showed up, and didn't bother checking voicemails when they managed to find ways to leave them. I even went into my Google Calendar and canceled my family's access to it, which they had been using like it was some kind of public notice board to drop reminders for events that I had never agreed to attend in the first place. I went full radio silence mode and started doing things that I hadn't made time for in years. Little things that brought me genuine peace and happiness. I started cooking actual meals for myself instead of just grabbing whatever would make the hunger go away. I picked up a book and actually finished reading it from cover to cover. I reorganized my entire closet, deleted old files from my laptop, and cleaned out my email inbox that had been cluttered for months. I began living in a way that didn't feel like I was constantly bracing myself for the next request, the next crisis, or the next expectation that would land on my shoulders. But just when I thought the fallout had finally gone completely quiet and they had moved on, I received a message that I almost deleted without checking. But then I saw the name attached to it. Jessica. Derek's now ex-girlfriend. We had never talked that much when they were together. She always struck me as someone who was trying way too hard to blend into our chaotic family dynamic. She was constantly nice, overly agreeable, and clearly working overtime to make Derek look more functional and stable than he really was. She was always smiling, always nodding along with whatever was being said, and I figured she would disappear the second she realized what she had actually signed up for. But apparently she had stuck around longer than I thought she would. The message came through Facebook of all places. I hadn't logged into that platform for months, but I got a weird email notification saying I had a new message, so I decided to check it out. "Hey Marcus, I know this is weird and you probably don't want to hear from anyone connected to your family right now," she began, "but I thought you should know something important. I left Derek for good." I paused and opened the full message to read the rest. He's been a complete mess since the trip got canceled. He started spiraling, drinking more, and lashing out at everyone around him, blaming everyone but himself for what happened. I didn't see it clearly before, but now I do. I just wanted to say that you were right about all of it. She went on to explain that she had witnessed him trying to guess my new passwords and had found him attempting to reset my bank login information just to check on my accounts. When she confronted him about this invasion of privacy, he didn't even bother denying it. Instead, he told her that I owed him money and that he was just taking what had already been promised to him. That part made my skin crawl with disgust and anger. Jessica wrote, "I'm sorry for the role I played in all of this. I knew where the money for the trip came from, and I should have said something to stop it. I just didn't know how to speak up at the time." I didn't reply to Jessica's message for a couple of days because I needed time to sit with what she had told me and process it all. On one hand, it was genuinely nice to hear someone finally acknowledge the truth of what had happened for once, instead of trying to gaslight me or make excuses for everyone's behavior. But on the other hand, her message made me realize just how deep the rot in my family really went. Derek was still actively trying to access my bank accounts weeks after everything had blown up. He was still attempting to crawl back into my finances like it was his birthright or something he was naturally entitled to. And the most disturbing part was that the rest of my family was still completely silent about his behavior. No one had called him out for what he was doing. No one had distanced themselves from his actions. They were all just pretending like the entire situation was some kind of unfortunate misunderstanding that would blow over with time. That's when it really hit me. They knew. All of them knew what Derek was like and what he was capable of. Maybe they didn't know every specific detail of his attempts to hack into my accounts. Maybe they weren't aware of the exact transactions he had made, but the general entitlement and boundary-crossing behavior? That was nothing new to them. That was normal. That was expected. They weren't shocked by Derek's actions because they didn't see a fundamental problem with his attitude toward my money and my boundaries. I wasn't dealing with people who were surprised by what had happened. I was dealing with people who thought this was just how family relationships were supposed to work. I eventually replied to Jessica, but I kept it short and to the point. "Thank you for telling me about this. I hope you find peace and happiness away from him." I finally did. And I truly meant every word of that response. That same night, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote out a long letter. I want to be clear. I wasn't planning to mail this letter to anyone in my family. It wasn't meant for them at all. This was for me, a way to finally take everything that had been spinning around chaotically in my head and dump it all onto paper so I could see it clearly. I wrote about what it was like being the dependable one in the family, the quiet one who never caused problems, the lucky one because I didn't need constant help and support. According to their twisted logic, not needing help meant I didn't deserve any love or consideration either. I wrote about every birthday they had forgotten over the years, every time I had covered Derek's expenses without being thanked, and every time they had criticized me for being too serious just because I wasn't failing upward through life like Derek was doing. I ended the letter with one simple line: "If your love depends on what I can give you, it was never love to begin with." When I finished writing, I folded the letter up carefully, put it in an envelope, and slid it into a box where I keep my old journals and personal writing. It's not a goodbye letter to them. It's a reminder to myself. A reminder that choosing yourself over toxic people isn't selfish behavior. It's survival. The next morning, I took another important step forward. I opened a completely new savings account at a different bank, a fresh start with different login credentials and updated security measures. I set up two-step verification, updated all my password information, and made absolutely sure that my name was the only one on every single document. And it hit me how fundamentally different this felt compared to before. This wasn't about the money anymore, though the financial security was obviously important. This was about ownership. Ownership of my finances, ownership of my time, and ownership of my life and my future. It's strange how quiet everything becomes once you stop answering attempts at contact. And I mean truly stop. Not just ignoring a phone call here or there, not just deleting a text message or muting a group chat temporarily. I'm talking about going completely and totally silent. No reactions, no responses, no little green dot showing you're active on messaging apps. Just complete radio silence. At first, the quiet felt unnatural and uncomfortable, like I had unplugged some machine that I wasn't supposed to touch. You know that weird feeling right after a power outage, where everything just sounds different and off? That was me walking around my apartment in the mornings without the constant ping of notifications from someone asking me for something, making my coffee without seeing a "can you cover this expense" message pop up on my phone. Just pure, uninterrupted stillness. I moved into a new place last month. Nothing particularly fancy or expensive, just a clean, affordable two-bedroom apartment with significantly more natural light and way less noise from neighbors. The most important part, nobody has my new address. Nobody helped me with the moving process. I packed everything myself, booked a professional moving company, and didn't tell a single soul about my plans. This wasn't done out of spite or to hurt anyone's feelings. It was simply necessary for my mental health and peace of mind. A complete reset and fresh start. But here's something I didn't think I would end up writing about. They found me anyway. I honestly have no idea how they managed to track me down. I didn't post my new address anywhere online. I didn't forward my mail to the new place. I even changed all the shipping information on my online accounts and set up a separate P.O. box for anything important that needed to be mailed to me. But somehow, maybe through a cousin who works in real estate, maybe Derek stalked my LinkedIn profile for clues, maybe they hired some kind of private investigator, they figured out where I was living. I was in the middle of eating leftover Chinese food for lunch, with the microwave humming and my dog Max half asleep by the front door, when I heard 3 distinct knocks. I peeked through the peephole and felt my stomach immediately sink with dread. Mom, Dad, and Derek were standing outside my door. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there, completely frozen, staring through the peephole. Part of me genuinely wanted to pretend I wasn't home and wait for them to leave, but their car was parked right out front in plain view, and Max had already gotten up with his tail wagging like the absolute traitor he is. The knocking came again, this time louder and more insistent. I took a deep breath, steeled myself for whatever was about to happen, and opened the door. "Surprise," Mom said in this artificially cheerful voice, like this was some kind of planned birthday party ambush. Dad gave me one of those tight, forced smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Derek said absolutely nothing, just leaned back against the doorframe like he was already annoyed to be there and had better places to be. I didn't say anything in response. I just looked at them and waited. Mom clapped her hands together in that overly enthusiastic way she does when she's nervous. We were in the area and figured, why not drop in and see your new place? It's been way too long since we've talked. "Yeah," I said in the flates tone I could manage. "That's kind of the entire point." She completely ignored my response and walked past me into my apartment like she owned the place. Dad followed her lead, and Derek stepped in last, giving me this half-hearted yo like we were still buddies or something. I shut the door behind them and stood there with my arms crossed, watching them look around my apartment like they were touring some kind of model home for potential buyers. "This is really nice," Mom said, walking through my kitchen and examining everything. "Bright, clean, very grown-up looking." Minimalist, Dad added, like he was doing me some kind of favor by approving of my life choices. Derek, meanwhile, opened my refrigerator without asking permission and just stood there judging my grocery choices like he was conducting some kind of inspection. I let this go on for exactly 4 minutes before I'd had enough. "So what do you want?" I asked directly. Mom blinked at me with fake innocence. "What do you mean? You didn't drive all the way across town with zero heads up just to compliment my window curtains," I said. "What do you actually want?" She gave me that tight, strained smile she always does when she's trying to act calm, but her voice gets all squeaky. "We wanted to see you and make things right between us." "Really?" I said, folding my arms across my chest. "Because the last time you saw me, you called me selfish for not funding your luxury vacation. And before that, you helped yourselves to $19,500 of my savings without asking. But sure, tell me all about how this visit is about making things right." Dad cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "All right, we'll just be completely honest then." I raised an eyebrow and waited for him to continue. He looked over at Derek, who suddenly found something extremely fascinating about my floor tiles. Then Dad looked back at me with a serious expression. "We're in a bit of a tight financial spot," he admitted. "Things haven't been the same since the whole trip situation happened. Our finances have been really rough lately, and we figured that maybe if we could just talk face to face, you'd see that we're genuinely trying to make an effort here." "Trying to do what exactly?" I asked. "Get another handout from me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then Derek finally piped up, "It's not like that, man." "Really?" I said, turning to look at him. "Because it feels exactly like that to me." Mom sat down on the edge of my couch very carefully, like she thought I might scold her for touching my furniture. "We're not here to take advantage of you, Marcus. We just thought that maybe you could help us get caught up on some things, temporarily." "How much?" I asked, deciding to skip all the emotional manipulation and get straight to the point. She paused for a long moment, clearly uncomfortable with having to name an actual number. "Well, we thought that maybe if you could loan us around $6,000, that would help us get back on our feet." I laughed out loud. Too loud. Max barked in response to the sudden noise. Derek scowled at my reaction. "Why is that funny?" Derek demanded. "Because it's absolutely insane," I replied. "You steal $19,500, disappear for months, guilt-trip me for cutting you off, show up at my new apartment without calling first, and now you're asking me for $6,000 like I'm your personal ATM with a nice view." Mom's face immediately dropped when she heard my response. "We weren't trying to hurt you. We didn't think—" "No, you never think," I snapped, cutting her off mid-sentence. "You just assume that I'll pay for everything, that I'll forgive anything, that I'll show up whenever you need something. And now what? You're back here with your hands out because Derek blew through whatever fake business venture he started last week?" Derek's temper flared at that comment. "This isn't all on me, you know." "No," I said, turning to face him directly. "Because every single time this family has needed something, it somehow lands squarely in my lap. You people break things, and then I'm expected to fix them. Well, not anymore." Dad tried a different approach, appealing to family loyalty. "What happened to family sticking together through tough times?" I stared at him for a long moment. "What happened is that you mistook unconditional love for unconditional access to my bank account." Mom stood up from the couch and I could see her eyes getting glossy with tears. "We made a mistake, Marcus." "No," I said firmly, stepping toward the door. "You made a deliberate choice and now I'm making one too." I opened the front door and held it open, making it clear that this conversation was over. "Please," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "We didn't know what else to do." "That's not my problem to solve anymore," I replied without wavering. They shuffled out one by one, each with their own reaction to being dismissed. Derek glared at me with obvious resentment. Dad said nothing at all, just walked past me with his head down. Mom turned around just before stepping outside and said, "I hope one day you understand that we were just doing our best." I nodded calmly. "And I hope one day you understand that your best doesn't mean I have to burn myself down to keep you warm." I shut the door firmly behind them and turned the deadbolt. I didn't bother watching them leave through the window. Instead, I stood in my quiet, sunlit kitchen, staring at the closed door, and waited for some kind of emotional reaction to kick in. Maybe anger, maybe guilt, maybe sadness about cutting ties with family. But all I felt was a deep, peaceful calm. Not relief exactly, and definitely not triumph. Just pure, simple calm, like the final piece of a complicated puzzle had finally snapped into place. They had come back thinking that the silence and distance was just temporary, that I would eventually cave under pressure like I always had before. They thought that maybe the new apartment, the changed phone number, And the time away was just some kind of phase I was going through that would eventually pass. But here's what I've learned. Closure isn't about dramatically slamming the door in someone's face. Real closure is realizing that you don't even owe them a door to knock on in the first place. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done. It's strange how completely everything changes once you stop answering altogether. And I mean truly, completely stop. Not just ignoring a call here or there, not just deleting the occasional text message, not just muting group chats temporarily. I'm talking about going absolutely totally silent. No reactions whatsoever, no responses of any kind, no little green dot next to your name on messaging apps showing that you're active. Just complete and total radio silence. At first, this level of quiet felt deeply unnatural, like I had unplugged some essential machine that I wasn't supposed to touch. You know that strange moment right after a power outage when everything just sounds wrong and different? That was me walking around my apartment in the mornings without the constant ping of notifications from someone asking me to cover an expense or handle a crisis. Making my morning coffee without seeing a "can you help us with this" bubble pop up on my phone screen. Just complete, uninterrupted stillness and peace. I moved into my new place last month. Nothing particularly fancy or expensive, just a clean, affordable 2-bedroom apartment with significantly more natural light and much less noise from neighbors than my old place. But the most important feature, nobody has my new address. Nobody helped me pack or move. I handled everything myself, booked a professional moving company, and didn't tell a single person about my plans. This wasn't done out of spite or to intentionally hurt anyone. It was simply necessary for my mental health and well-being. A complete reset and fresh start. But there's something I didn't expect to be writing about. Somehow they managed to track me down anyway. I have absolutely no idea how they figured out my new location. I didn't post the address anywhere online. I didn't set up mail forwarding to the new place. I even changed all the shipping information on my online shopping accounts and set up a separate P.O. box for anything important that needed to be delivered. But through some method, maybe a cousin who works in real estate, maybe Derek cyberstalked my LinkedIn profile for clues, maybe they actually hired some kind of private investigator, they managed to find me. The whole experience taught me something important. They came back expecting the silence to be temporary. They thought I'd eventually give in to family pressure like I always had before. They believed that the new apartment, the changed phone number, and the extended time away were just part of some phase I was going through. Closure isn't about dramatically slamming doors or making grand gestures. True closure is realizing that you don't owe toxic people access to your life, even if they share your DNA. I wasn't angry anymore after that final confrontation. I was genuinely, completely done with the entire dynamic.